Michella Chester here with NCAA Digital. I am joined by Evan Marinofsky today, our NCAA.com D1 ice hockey beat reporter. Just did a bracket projection for women's and men's. We're doing the men's now. Evan, not an easy thing to do. Can you let us know how you put this together?
Not an easy thing to do at all, Michella. The good thing, obviously, is that it's 16 teams and not 64, which is what you do with volleyball. But going from 11 with women's to 16 with men's, not the easiest thing, but I made one at the beginning of the year for men's, so the rules weren't too difficult to follow. It starts with no conference matchups in the first round. Not too difficult to avoid in this situation. The other one was obviously making sure some teams were at least near their regional sites, so then fans can come, pack the places, and have an electric atmosphere. The one other thing I had to take into consideration, it's not really a rule, but it is something I didn't expect, and that's the Olympics. 15 current college hockey players are going to Beijing in the Olympics, so I had to take into consideration for each team, if you're missing an Olympian, chances are the guy's pretty good, and he might help your team a bit. So I had to kind of take that into consideration as I was predicting the rest of each team's season, which, again, not an easy thing to predict the rest of each season. So those are the rules. They weren't too difficult to follow, and luckily I did one at the beginning of the season as well.
Yeah, 2 months away from selections now. So let's go through your top 4 teams. What are your top 4 and how did you order them and why?
So my top 4 teams, the top 2 I don't think anyone's going to have an issue with. Minnesota State's the best team in the nation, most consistent, best all-around team. I think they're going to be number 1. That shouldn't be a huge issue. Number 2 is Michigan. They're going to be missing a lot of guys because of the Olympics, but that lineup is still so freaking good that I don't think it's going to really matter. They've been, really good all year, dominant at times. They're going to be the number 2. The 3 and 4 is where I think people are going to have some debate with, Michella. Quinnipiac is a team that is currently, as we record this, number 1. I see them as a top 3 team for sure, but in pair-wise, they're an ECAC, which we'll get to in a bit, but that doesn't usually help ECAC teams be number 1 overall seeds. I still think this team's going to go on a run through the rest of the year. They looked so good at Harvard last week. I think they're going to definitely be a number 1 seed. The other one's an NCHC team. It's Western Michigan. Now, they have the pair-wise. It's just, can they emerge from the bloodbath that is the NCHC? I picked them to be the team. I also picked them to win that conference. And it's an interesting team because they've been good against high seeds all year. They're actually the tallest and heaviest team in college hockey, both, which is kind of rare to find. They're very old. They're the veteran team. They've been through a lot. This is their chance. This is their chance in that NCHC conference. So to me, I look at them as a surefire number 4 seed in the number 1s. I know a lot of people might say Denver or St. Cloud State or North Dakota, but Western Michigan, I went bold. Western Michigan is my pick to be the 4th number 1 seed.
All right, I like it. So you mentioned you made this bracket earlier in the year, just 2 weeks into the season. What are some of the biggest differences now from that bracket, now that you had a little bit more to go off of?
So I got to be honest, I was kind of wrong in a few places, which I guess sometimes can happen. Isn't that wild? But it's funny. I actually had Minnesota State and Michigan in my number 1 seeds in different spots, but I'll give myself credit. They were in the number 1 seeds. On my first number 1 seed, though, I did have St. Cloud State in there, which I think they could honestly easily be a number 1 seed. I just predict Western Michigan at this point. St. Cloud State will still be a solid seed in this tournament. The other number 1 seed I had that's different is Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is kind of abruptly lost their star goalie, Jack LaFontaine, to the NHL midseason. So I kind of see them being a team that's more of a 3 seed, whereas at the beginning of the year, I picked them to be a number 1. They've also had some inconsistency in plays. They went a long time without winning a weekend series. So they're a team that I think is also not going to be in the number 1s, which I had initially. The other one was Arizona State. They were my fun kind of off-the-board pick. I had them as a number 4 seed, I believe. 2 weeks into the season. They probably are not going to be in the tournament, but that's a fun team. That's such a fun program. They're emerging quickly. That's going to be a team that I think whoever predicts the brackets in future years should put Arizona State on there because they're going to be in it in the future, but unfortunately probably not this year.
So let's take a look at the entire bracket. You just built it. What are some of the most intriguing possible matchups in this version?
Well, Michella, we love upsets, and when we talk about upsets, one matchup I'm looking at is that Albany Regional. Michigan taking on Northeastern Michigan again is such a firepower offensively. Northeastern, though, has the best goalie in the nation in Devin Levi. Levi has been outstanding this year, and if there's any player in this national tournament who could stop a Michigan team with such an offensive attack, it could be Levi. So that's one matchup I have my eye on. The other matchup I have my eye on is in that same regional. It's UMass and North Dakota. Again, UMass is the reigning national champions going up against one of the best NCHC teams in North Dakota. They got Jake Sanderson. That would be a really intriguing matchup. Another matchup I have my eye on is Minnesota Duluth and Cornell. Cornell was a team that was really affected by the shutdown in 2019-20, just given that they were one of the best teams. They had to shut down, and then they didn't even get to play last year because of the Ivy League shutdown. They go up against one of the NCHC powerhouses in Minnesota Duluth, and again, Duluth is a team who was originally number 1 this year at one point, and Cornell is a team that has had success against NCHC teams this year, beating and sweeping North Dakota this year. So those are my 3 really intriguing matchups, but again, all of those matchups are really must-watch.
How about the rest of the NCHC? This is a loaded conference, as you mentioned. What does their slate look like in your bracket?
Well, you're right with loaded. There's a lot of NCHC. If you don't like NCHC teams, I recommend you don't watch this national tournament because there's a lot of NCHC going on. I looked down at Loveland, Colorado. They got Western Michigan versus Notre Dame. I don't see that being too tough of a matchup for Western Michigan. I also look at Denver and Minnesota. I don't look at Minnesota being too much of a threat to Denver. So that could be a potential Western Michigan, Denver, NCHC clash in the second round, which I think people would love to see, no matter your allegiances in college hockey. The other one's St. Cloud State and UMass Lowell. I don't see that being too tough a matchup for St. Cloud State either. St. Cloud State was in the national championship game last year and lost. I predict them to be a team that is just kind of motivated by revenge. That's the NCHC. There's a ton of NCHC games to watch. And again, even some of the matchups I mentioned, like Western Michigan, Notre Dame, got to watch them. Still going to be so interesting because they're going to have such ramifications for down the line.
Absolutely. Well, Evan, this is always so much fun. Thanks so much for joining me and breaking down your bracket.